Host. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show. It's Thursday, the 20th of January, 2022, and we're going to spend a couple of hours together looking at the news and getting to know each other. You can get in touch. Just wake up your device, say, and then your message if you're using an Echo Show. If you are using another Echo device, you can listen for sure, but you might want to communicate with us via backchannel.tv on your browser. And also we're streaming live on YouTube, so there's a good chance that you could watch the show, comment, and just be in touch there as well. I'm Anthony Davis, as I said. We've got lots to get through. We're going to also take a look at the morning newspapers and see what's happening right around the US. We're going to discuss the prominent sports figures supporting the bill that would require absentee voting access. We'll look at that story in depth. Also, Florida lawmakers creating new ways to keep public records private, says an article on the Tallahassee Democrats website. We'll be exploring that further. And staying in Florida, Ron DeSantis ignites intra-party fight over fate of minority congressional districts, says the Miami Herald. More on that as well. And as we always like to celebrate a famous person, or in fact, an infamous person who you may have never heard of, today we will be looking at Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who in 1869 became the first woman to testify before the U.S. Congress. We'll look at the life of this women's rights activist from New York, and of course, lots to discuss with reflection on last night's failure to get either voting rights bill passed in Congress, in the Senate. Okay, let's jump straight into the newspapers. First, we're going to go to Texas, to Abilene, and to the Abilene Reporter News. And the headline there, "It Takes Guts." Yes, this is they're basically stuffing haggis, and if you don't know what Scottish haggis is, well, you're definitely missing out. It might be the worst part of like an English breakfast or a Scottish breakfast. So the headline is, "And Spices and Passion to Honour Scottish Bard Burns." I came across the definition for haggis. Haggis is a savoury pudding containing sheep's pluck, obviously written by a fan. The British, they are so considerate, they put "you" in everything, have a way of describing things such as pudding that we don't. Chocolate pudding, I get. What is sheep's pluck? Internal organs? Heart, liver, kidneys. I saw lungs on one list too, says Greg, who wrote this column, and is probably regretting that he ever did. So, for some reason, two guys are stuffing an intestine filled with haggis for Dvorak to tie Saturday. It's the annual Burns Supper on Saturday night, an event at which poetry of Scottish bard Robert Burns will be read and haggis eaten. You don't want to eat haggis. It really is. The reason it was made with those ingredients, just so you kind of know, is because they were cheap. It's not because they're delicious. It's because they were the bits left over that nobody wanted. And that's why they turned it into a pudding. Because, you know, the Scottish don't like to waste anything. I've spent a lot of time in Scotland. I understand the culture. Trust me. Texas hostage taker had raised no red flags, also on the front of the newspaper for this Thursday morning. It says the gunman who took 4 people hostage at a Texas synagogue in a 10-hour standoff that ended in his death was checked against law enforcement databases before entering the U.S. That story's like 2 days old, but for some reason the local newspaper is just sticking it on the front page, you know. I think the difference is they've got a photograph of him now, so this is why they've kind of included that. He's a British citizen, and he arrived at Kennedy, and then he went on to Dallas, bought a gun, slept in, homeless shelters, and then attacked on Saturday in the suburb of Colleyville. Saban and others urge Manchin to protect voting rights. Now, this is actually kind of my most favorite story of the morning, to be honest, because, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema basically are two Democrats in name only who derailed an entire democratic political movement. Well, not even a democratic movement. It's democracy. Democracy is not exclusive to Democrats. And now they're going to face a backlash from people who are in their immediate circle, hopefully. They'll lose friends. So we'll talk about this in more detail later. But the headline is Saban, others urge Manchin to protect voting rights. University of Alabama head football coach Nick Saban and other prominent sports figures with ties to West Virginia have urged U.S. Senator Joe Manchin to support sweeping legislation to protect the rights to vote. Well, he's like 6 months too late. You know, all this campaigning should have been a while ago. And this is my concern, you know, that we are, I don't know, it's almost like, what have they been doing in the last 12 months? I mean, I was reading articles about this gerrymandering and all of these additional laws that Republicans were imposing at a state level more than a year ago. Literally, the moment the election ended, that's when they started. That's when the coup went underground. Some great new stuff came to the January 6th committee yesterday. Oof, my goodness. From Stephanie Grisham. Ooh. I mean, some of the stuff, Jamie Raskin was right, you know. It's going to blow our heads off. I mean that in the nicest possible way. Okay, next on the agenda is, the Caller Times from Corpus Christi in Texas. They lead this morning with South Texas school districts in need of substitute teachers. This is because of the strain of staff shortages as COVID-19 cases continue to rise daily. And as of Wednesday, Corpus Christi ISD had reported 649 COVID cases from faculty members. Also, ever wants to be a substitute teacher? Here's your chance. South Texas school districts are in dire need of substitute teachers as COVID cases are rising. Yeah, if you've got any free time, please save the school. Talk, thank you for joining us from Ohio. Welcome to Backchannel. Also, Corpus Christi paved its first streets in the 1910s. And there's a nice, I love old photographs like this. And they've put an image of the unpaved Charapel Street in Shatzel. Looking north around the turn of the century, rain often turned the streets to a sea of mud. I mean, it actually just looks like a scene from a Western. That's what it looks like, to me anyway. So they're just, I think they're just celebrating the fact that they have sidewalks. That's where they're at in Texas at the moment. They're just like, you know something? Forget all these voting rights, abortion laws, all this stuff. We have sidewalks. I think it's an aeroplane. I hear the strangest noises here sometimes, and because I'm like in a bunker, I get a little nervous because I'm like, oh, hang on a second, you know, like, is there an earthquake or something? And I'm just checking because I have some software that tells me. And that was actually a Black Hawk helicopter that just flew over my head at 1,500 feet. A Black Hawk. You know, like one of the ones that went to get Osama bin Laden. Flew over directly over my head at 1,500 feet. A Sikorsky UH-60A Black Hawk helicopter at 1,500 feet. And it was only doing around 120 knots. And that's why I was like, what is that? And the software just told me that a military helicopter almost, I think maybe they heard the show. And they were like, you can't say that about Texas. Maybe that's what it was. Carla, you ever had a Black Hawk buzz you at 1,500 feet? It's pretty terrifying. It's pretty terrifying. This is America. You know, I'm convinced, because there's often a lot of military activity. I don't know why here in California, but I think it's sometimes as a show of strength. Just to remind the people who's in charge. I used to think that when the Trump administration was in. I don't really think that so much now. Isn't it funny how like the psychology of governance can really get to you? It's very interesting. Okay, let's move on now to the Dallas Morning News. Court rejects Trump appeal on papers. Yes, the Supreme Court on Wednesday, that is packed with conservatives, incidentally, so just to show that they occasionally do kind of err on the side of justice. They turned down former President Donald Trump's request to shield his White House records from the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. With one dissent, the justices agreed with two lower courts, which decided that the former president's claim of executive privilege could not outweigh the views of President Biden, who supported the release. It was only Clarence Thomas that voted to grant Trump's appeal. Why you, Clarence Thomas? I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know, like, democracy is at stake here. The guy said, we're going to, you know, if you don't show strength, you're not going to have a country anymore. I'm going to go with you. We're going to march to the Capitol. He said it like that. We're going to march to the Capitol. So what's come out, the Stephanie Grisham stuff that's just coming out, is she was basically there when they were deciding if Trump should go to the Capitol with them. You know, pre the speech. It's very interesting. It's all happening. Okay, despite setbacks, Biden cites gains. President Joe Biden on Wednesday sought to reframe his presidency as one of challenges, but also enormous progress, saying he would restart efforts to pass his signature legislative agenda and use the midterm election campaigns to push harder against Republican obstinates. He said, "For all this progress, I know there's a lot of frustration and fatigue in this country," during a news conference marking his first year in office, referring to the pandemic, the persistent and deadly pandemic. He said, "But while it's cause for concern, it's not cause for panic. It's not going to go away immediately, but I'm not going to give up and accept things as the way they are now." I'll be honest, if I can just give a very brief analysis of the speech. Now, he spoke for about 20 minutes, and then he took questions in total, the whole thing was like 1 hour and 50 minutes. Right? And he could have had it done in half the time, because he does like go around the houses and, you know, and it was, to me, the first time I recognized that his age is compromising his ability to communicate. Not his ability to govern, not his ability to president, but his ability to communicate. His age coupled with his speech impediment, because, of course, he has overcome a stutter, and that still presents itself when public speaking, occasionally, because of, you know, the pressure of public speaking, which is completely understandable. Of course, the right-wing media will just clip all of the bits where he stuttered, and they'll cut it all together, and they'll be like, this is a man in severe cognitive decline. And it's not true. The guy is absolutely there. My issue is that his age is affecting his ability to communicate. And for the first time, it kind of suggested to me that, hang on, is this why they haven't done that many press conferences with him? Is that the reason why they've kept him off of the podium? Because it's not his natural home. The other thing was that the microphones were broken. And as you know, I'm a bit of a microphone, I was going to say Nazi, but that's a really bad word in this situation. I do love a microphone. I'm a fanatic. There you go, fanatical. More fanatical than extremist. And I have lots of them here. I actually collect them, and I have been collecting them since I was a kid. Did you know this, Carla? I probably have in the region of 30 like nice microphones, and I have another one arriving tomorrow. I mean, I just love them. I really do. This one I was using, and I just took it down. This is a black version of this. They're slightly different. This one was designed in like 1957, and they haven't changed the design since. So anyway, I digress. I'm watching this, and I'm listening to him, and I'm like, wow, how is it possible that the President of the United States is using faulty sound equipment? You couldn't hear him. It was like he was like going in, and then it was all going all thin, and you couldn't hear him. It was all like kind of off mic, and he was standing in. He didn't move. There was something wrong with the sound. Not the microphone, I don't think. They were probably okay, but it was the cable. There was a buzz. It was awful. And then when it came to taking questions, which was the majority of the thing, the people that were being, you know, that were on the handheld mics that were asking the questions, the journalists, they sounded great. And his answers sounded terrible. And the problem is when you've got, and the reason the stakes are so high on something like this, is when you've got a president who is struggling in the polls, who's just had 2 pieces of legislation voted down in the Senate, who can't get his major election promises like social care and climate through the House, to then not be able to hear him because the sound is faulty. I mean, that is a fate worse than death, because it diminishes him. And this is something that Trump was very, very good at. He was a real production guy, like a production guy. He wanted it to look amazing, to sound amazing. And if ever there was feedback on a mic at a rally or something not right with the sound, Trump knew instantly. And he kind of looked to the side and stared daggers at whoever was operating. And they knew full well that he was not happy. And, this is why he always had people come on and speak before him, because he wanted the sound to be tweaked so that when he got on, it was perfect. But with Biden, Biden got up to an empty lectern, and it obviously hadn't been tested properly. And it sounded awful. And it just diminished his ability to president. You need to look and sound slick. It's essential. And I was thinking about his shirts. I wondered if he buys a new shirt every day, because his shirts, his collars are just they're in such good condition. And I was thinking, if you're the president, do you have a new shirt? I mean, I'm sure he just has it washed and pressed, but it looks box fresh. If only he looked box fresh. He's amazingly fit and capable for his age. But he underestimated, and he admitted he underestimated his ability to get Republicans on board with this. And he also admitted, and this is the thing that I was so embarrassed, I actually looked away from the television at this point. I just was like, I cannot believe I'm hearing this. One of the journalists asked him that Mitt Romney, who, voted to impeach Trump and, is a very liberal conservative, said he'd never even received a phone call from the White House about considering joining them on voting rights. Never even received a phone call. And I was like, wow, surely if you've got 2 dissenters in your party, Sinema and Manchin, and you need votes, you get the president to invite people like Senator Mitt Romney to the White House for coffee. And you just say, look, this is a once-in-a-generation chance. And he didn't. He didn't reach out to any Republicans. And he admitted it. And I was like, OMG, how long has this been going on? It turns out all he was doing was working on Democrats. Why would you even need to work on Democrats? Why are you wasting your time with Sinema and Manchin? They were never going to do it. Go and get 2 more Republicans. Promise them a place in the cabinet. Invite them to be part of your administration, if it means getting voting rights through. I mean, I was aghast. And I lost a lot of respect for him, I'll be honest. Because like a lot of people, I was like, he's not the best candidate for president, but he can win. And that's why I was interested, because I was like, this guy could win, and he did win. Because he's a moderate, Democrat, and he's an old white guy. As tragic as that is. Did you hear what Mitch McConnell said after the vote? Got up on the podium, was interviewed. He lied about voting rights. And I quote, he said that, let me try and remember. I might actually, can I play it to you? I'll play it to you. Because, I mean, this is really, I don't want to misquote him, so I'm just going to play it. But this is the situation that we're faced with. That we are basically now dealing with white supremacy at its I mean, it's not even hiding anymore. Just listen to the words of Mitch McConnell. This is just a 20-second press conference, or 20-second clip from the press conference from yesterday. This is Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. Here it is.
What's your message for voters of color who are concerned that without the John L. Lewis Voting Rights Act, they're not going to be able to vote in the midterm?
Well, the concern is misplaced because if you look at the statistics, African American voters are voting in just as high a percentage as Americans.
Did you hear that? African American voters are voting in just as high percentages as Americans. He suggested that African Americans are not Americans. He referred to white people, his people, as Americans, and the others as African Americans. I'll play the clip again, and you can have another little listen. Here it is.
Well, the concern is misplaced because if you look at the statistics, African American voters are voting in just as high a percentage as Americans.
I mean, if that's his internal thinking, that's how he sees it. Americans are white, African Americans are not Americans. I mean, if that's the way it compartmentalizes it in his brain, then we've got a problem, because he's the leader of the Republican Party. He said it out loud. He said the quiet part out loud. And I was like, wow, really? And I guarantee he will not issue an apology for that and say, I misspoke. That's just the way he sees it. Kentucky, incidentally, is on its knees. It has the worst COVID cases in the whole of America now. Mitch McConnell's state. That guy has rigged elections in Kentucky so that he will win every time. He's been doing it for years. And yet it is one of the poorest states and struggles the most. And he does nothing. I mean, he has all this power and he does nothing for his people. Now we know why. Dallas County tops 500,000 cases. Milestone reached after nearly 2 years into the pandemic. Dallas County in Texas reported its 500,000th COVID-19 case on Wednesday, a dark threshold in a pandemic that continues to disrupt lives nearly 2 years after it began. In the 680 days since the first presumptive case of COVID-19 was reported in Dallas County, residents across North Texas have grappled with temporary shutdowns, adjustments into and out of online learning, conflicting advice on face coverings, and back and forth battles over mask and vaccine mandates. So, yeah, I mean, it's it's like all of the red states where they have banned masks or prevented mask mandates and prevented vaccine mandates, and all of these things are suffering the most with COVID. It's not rocket science. It's just common sense. Dems call for DOJ to monitor audit. 10 lawmakers request oversight of results in 4 Texas counties. Yes, they say 10 Democratic members of Congress led by Dallas Representative Colin Eldred on Wednesday called on the Department of Justice to monitor the ongoing audit of 2020 election results in Dallas, Tarrant, and Harris counties. Aldred's request comes as elections remain in the forefront in both Texas and Washington. In the past several days, elections administrators in North Texas and in several of the largest countries have reported having to reject hundreds of applications for mail-in ballots. So that's interesting, isn't it? That's the Dallas Morning News this morning as we discuss how elections are potentially being rigged, future elections, but also, more importantly, how how would I put this? It's like the poorest states, the states that seem to be struggling the most. And I know, look, Texas does very well for those who are involved in the oil trade. But if you're not in the oil trade, you are struggling in that state. It's 9:24. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Talk is with us. Thank you for spending your morning. Talk says, good afternoon. Yes, well, you're in Ohio, so you're 3 hours ahead of me. 9, 10, 11, 12. 12:24 in Ohio. And let's see what's next on the list. We're going to go to the Florida Today next. Yes, we've got a lot to say about Florida today. This is from Melbourne, Florida. Local hotel scrutinized after deaths. Business is taking action. A suspected homicide, 3 overdose deaths, narcotics activity, and frequent police responses plagued America's best value inn and suites last year. I've stayed in this hotel. I know this hotel. Seriously. America's best value inn and suites. I've stayed there. I recognize that photograph. I'm sure of it. It wasn't me. Now the West Melbourne City Council is zeroing in on criminal activity at the 2-story hotel near John Rhodes Boulevard, which has been a constant source of frustration for the police department. West Melbourne Police logged 362 business patrols last year at America's best value inn and suites. I mean, what a luxury accommodation that really is. I mean, the key there is in the title, isn't it? Darling, I've booked us a room at Best Value Inn and Suites. I hope that we get the suite and not the inn. This is crazy, isn't it? Also, what else do we have here? Starlink satellite mission takes flight. This is interesting. Yes, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket provided some much-needed warmth to the Space Coast late on Tuesday and launched yet another batch of the company's Starlink internet satellites. 9 Merlin main engines roared to life at 9:02 p.m. EST, punching through Florida's cooler-than-normal 45-degree weather to deliver the 36th batch of Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. I mean, how many satellites are up there now? I mean, it's going to be busier than the Spaghetti Junction. Because Musk was asked about this recently. You know, they were saying, you know, are you not sending too much stuff up there? Are you not going to? And he's like, there's a lot of room up there. There's a lot of room. That was basically his answer. A total of 49 of the internet beaming spacecraft were packed into Falcon 9's payload fairing. Shortly after liftoff, the company wrapped up its 103rd successful landing with the touchdown of Falcon 9's first stage on the shortfall of Gravitas drone ship stationed southeast of Florida. Just think about this for a moment. Musk has designed ships that take off, do their business, land again on a ship in the middle of the ocean. And they never miss. I mean, have you seen the videos of those things touching down? Back, it looks like someone's rewound the tape and it's flying backwards. I mean, it is the technology behind this. I mean, the fact that these people have the ability to not just successfully take off, but also to successfully return. And they're completely automated. I wouldn't mind, but there's no one flying that thing. I mean, we could totally now be flown in commercial passenger jets without anybody sitting in the front. The whole thing would just happen automatically. The hardest part for navigation with commercial jets is taxiing around the airport, because the airport's so busy. Once you take off, it's easy, fully automated. But taxiing around the airport, I don't know. Kind of want someone to be steering, looking for a parking space. Is that big enough? Do you ever think that? If you're ever on an aeroplane and you pull into the gate, do you ever look and see the next plane next to you and think, that our wings are definitely going to touch? The wings look way too long for this parking space. It's a little bit like the wing mirrors, the rear view mirrors on the side of your car. You're like, I just got in this space. I always think that when the aeroplane is parking. I'm like, that's a bit close, isn't it? I think it's going to be fine, honestly. Also on the front of the Florida Today, man charged with attempted murder in jogger attack, an 18-year-old coca man, remains jailed after investigators said he ambushed a jogger on Sunday after watching a violent movie and making plans to kill the man and keep the body in his bedroom closet. What? I mean, what's happened to people? The jogger, who was trained in martial arts, was able to free himself from a cloth robe belt that the man identified as Logan William Smith threw around his neck. The jogger was not seriously injured. I mean, he wanted to keep the body in his bedroom closet. I'm just trying to get my head round, like, A, why the bedroom closet, but B, why you want to keep him? What are you gonna do with him? Is it someone to talk to? Just get an echo device. You can ask it any question you like. I mean, that is nuts, isn't it? Okay, let's move on from the Florida Today and go to the Tallahassee Democrat. I love the names of these papers. A night for the record books is the headline. Florida State Seminoles men's basketball team back on the court Thursday after a 79-78 overtime thriller against Duke. I don't know what any of that means, but I tried to say it with confidence. It's something about baseball? I don't know. DeSantis redrawing districts bewilders Al Lawson. This is a very interesting story. This is we discussed this a little bit yesterday. This was Ron DeSantis showing up with his own congressional districting map that had basically favored all the white people, and he presented it to be considered. It says Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' entry into congressional redistricting landed with a thud amongst Democrats and minorities, and data experts for that matter. A proposal released on Sunday night wipes out a seat that includes half of Tallahassee and is currently occupied by the Dean of Leon County politics, Democratic Congressman Al Lawson, who served nearly 3 decades in the Florida legislature before his election to Congress in 2016. I don't know why the governor wants to pick a fight with me, Lawson said on Tuesday morning. A quick review of the plan shows it benefits Republicans at the expense of black and Hispanic voters. That's why he wants to pick a fight with you. Because he's a racist. I'm telling you, I've been saying this time and time again. The Make America Great Again means Make America White Again. It is a fear from the majority white Republicans that the statistics on race are ever-changing to the point that they are close to being in the minority in America. It's about, what, is it like 47% ethnic minority now? And they're getting nervous because they want to maintain their majority. This is not about politics. It's about race. I mean, it's so offensive. But the thing is, it's so obvious. I mean, listen to Mitch McConnell yesterday saying that African Americans vote as much as Americans. It wasn't an accidental slip of the tongue. That's what he thinks. That's in his mind. The thing is, in order to say that out loud, you have to have those thoughts. Florida health director put on leave for urging staff to vaccinate. I mean, this is... Governor Ron DeSantis' administration, already facing criticism for downplaying the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccinations, has put on leave Orange County Health Director Dr. Paul Pino for encouraging his staff to get vaccinated. Pino had written in January on the 4th of January to his staff, "I have a hard time understanding how we can be in public health and not practice it." I'm just having a moment's silence now for the people that may have died because of Ron DeSantis' decision to even prevent people in healthcare from getting vaccinated. So what's going to happen? People are going to come to the hospital with other ailments, and the staff could potentially give them coronavirus. Are you out of your tiny mind, man? Big body, small head. Ron DeSantis. Okay, we're going to talk about DeSantis a little bit later. We've got a lot to say about that man, but we have to go to Idaho next, to the Idaho Statesman. Bill would extend immunity for Idaho COVID-19 lawsuits is the headline. A new bill would extend business immunity from civil claims that seek damages for a coronavirus exposure. Meanwhile, there have been no claims in Idaho to seek damages for a coronavirus injury since the pandemic began. This is what we were discussing yesterday. These are like laws in search of a problem. House Bill 444, sponsored by Representative Julianne Young, would extend an act that protects businesses, schools, and government agencies from liability for exposing someone, whether an employee or patron, to the coronavirus. The bill would extend the law again for another year until the 1st of July 2023. Young told a House panel on Monday the initial 2020 bill barred frivolous lawsuits related to COVID-19 so that businesses and schools could operate amid the uncertainty of the pandemic. What about just wearing a mask and getting vaccinated and just doing the basic stuff so none of this is a problem? No. I'll tell you what, we'll do none of that, but we're going to stop people from suing us. Also on the front of the newspaper, the Idaho Statesman, COVID cases spike among students and staff in Idaho schools. I mean, can you believe here we are 2 years into the pandemic and the numbers have never been like this? And I want to quote Donald Trump for a minute. And his voice echoes in my head. In a few days, it'll be gone. It'll go away. Like a miracle, it'll be gone. Do you remember that line? In a few days, it'll be gone. Like a miracle, he said. That's basically, because I analyzed that sentence a lot at the time, and I realized that that's him saying, this is a translated version of that for his inner monologue. In a few days, I'll stop thinking about it. And when I stop thinking about it, it won't exist anymore. That is the attitude of the narcissist. You know, the narcissist is not just about thinking that they're the best looking or the best this or the best that. It's about thinking that they have supreme power over the world around them. And that if they choose to ignore something, it doesn't exist anymore. That's the level to which the malignant narcissist takes themselves seriously. And that's why he said he was, chosen by God. Do you remember he looked up? Not at the eclipse. That was another thing. He looked up and he said, I think I might have been selected. He actually said out loud that he thinks that his presidency was a God-given gift to the people. And he believed it. Carla, do you know much about Donald Trump's obsession with jeans? Do you know about this? You're going to love this. So this goes back a long way through his parents and potentially his grandparents. But there is a whole cult of people that believe in this genetic purity. And again, it has its basis in white supremacy. But there is footage of Trump at every rally referring to his good genes, and other people, when white people get up, he will refer to their genes. They got good genes. He's obsessed with genetics. And maybe you can find the name that's given to this. There is a whole name that is given to this cult of people that believe in the genetics of the white man. And this is, again, contributes to my opinion about why an increasing number of Republicans want to make America white again. It's because of this whole kind of genome space that they think about. And Trump is in this cult where they believe that this pure kind of Aryan white supremacy it makes them superior, makes them special, makes them godlike, God-given. What's the name given to it, Carla? It's called Trump's gene. It's called gene. It's something like hereditary genes or something. There's a phrase that's given to this whole cult. Let me have a look. Let's see. It's very interesting. I mean, this really is, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the guy's thinking, They're obsessed with this. But I really would love to know what it's called. There's something about these. If you know, of course you can message me, or you could just say it out loud. you know, could just say it out loud. And once we break the code on what this, you know, on what it is, genetic superiority and bloodlines, good genes, he refers to it, but what's the name of it? Eugenics. That's what it is. It's called eugenics. Have you heard this before? Yeah. This is the whole thing. Eugenics. Yeah. So, there's a very interesting article. It's called racehorse theory. That's right. It's a racehorse theory, and Trump's eugenics obsession. He thinks he has good German genes because he's a fascist, is what this headline says. I'll read you this article. It's very, very interesting. It says, even though we knew from the beginning we were dealing with an essentially authoritarian leader, our awareness of it has sometimes been subsumed amid the sheer chaos of the daily news during his presidency. Eugenics. Have you heard that phrase, eugenics, before? It's a whole cult. It's a whole cult. It's a subsection of white supremacy. It says, but if you look at various issues Trump is most obsessed with, whether it was the lurid obsession with terrorist violence and refugees during the 2016 campaign, or his preoccupation with immigrants, the pardoning of war criminals, his flirtation with dictators, the endless threats to jail his political opponents and muzzle the press, the valorizing of the Confederacy and the openly racist law and order campaign, it's pretty clear what gets him excited, along with his devoted following. But wait, you say, Donald Trump only cares about himself. He's not interested in anything as abstract as issues, not even the ones that tickle his lizard brain. It says, but these are not mutually exclusive things. You see, Donald Trump genuinely believes he is scientifically superior to all those others and that they must be kept in check with whatever level of violence may be necessary. He doesn't talk about this a whole lot, but it definitely comes up from time to time. In Minnesota, in the midst of one of his most rambling racist rallies in a long while, Trump said this, startling quite a few people who perhaps weren't aware of his deep and abiding belief in eugenics. The last time he brought this up was in May when he visited a Ford plant to praise the organization for some PPP initiative. It says Trump is poorly educated, so he probably doesn't even know that such language evokes Nazi Germany's eugenics program and Adolf Hitler's theory of the master race, especially when discussing the notorious anti-Semite Henry Ford. But it's clear enough that regardless of the historical content, Trump is on Ford's wavelength when it comes to eugenics. He's talked about bloodlines before, you know, weirdly telling a group of British businessmen in 2018 that you've all got such good bloodlines in this room, you've all got such amazing DNA. He obviously didn't know anything about their bloodlines, but he made the assumption they must be amazing because they were a bunch of rich, successful, white men. According to Trump biographer Michael D'Antonio, he does believe in a racehorse theory of human development. It's all about breeding. I'm a big believer in natural ability, Trump told me during a discussion about his leadership traits when he said he came from a natural sense of how human relations work. If Obama had that psychology, Putin wouldn't be eating his lunch. He doesn't have that psychology and he never will. It's not in his DNA. Later in this discussion, Trump said, I believe in being prepared and all that stuff, but in many respects, the most important thing is an innate ability. You see, this is all about Trump not reading anything in advance, not reading a president's daily briefing, not listening to anybody other than his own instinct. And this all goes back to him believing he has great genes. That means that he's not required to study or consult experts or really ever bother to learn anything. He explained this to the Washington Post back in 2016 in a series of interviews, that he does not need to read because he reaches the right decisions with very little knowledge other than the knowledge I already have. Plus the words common sense, because I have a lot of common sense, he said, and I have a lot of business ability. He believes that when he makes decisions, people see that he instinctively knows the right thing to do. A lot of people said, man, he was more accurate than guys who have studied it all the time. This all goes back to this bloodlines thing, this racehorse theory, this kind of Nazi trope. This is why they wanted to eliminate the Jews, because they wanted to be the superior race. And this is what Trump feels. At the CDC, Trump said he mentioned once that his uncle, John Trump, an electrical engineer and inventor taught at MIT, which he believes confers him the same level of intelligence because of their shared genes. I saw him say this when it happened at the time. Kept talking about, oh yes, my uncle John Trump. He taught at MIT. And he was convinced that because his uncle taught at MIT, that gave him superior genes. For Trump, this isn't just idle talk about an accomplished relative. It says this is central to his understanding of the world and his ability to navigate it. He simply does whatever he feels like in the moment, secure in the knowledge it must be right because his instincts are superior to any book learning due to his great bloodlines. Consider his obvious willingness to sacrifice the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans to the pandemic for his own purposes. As he put it, we will let it wash over the country and achieve herd mentality. That's what he said. Herd mentality. Or what about the horrific conditions at the border over those years? And the accusations that doctors were performing hysterectomies and other sterilization procedures on immigrant women against their will. Think about what the former Homeland Security Chief of Staff, Miles Taylor, reported. This was the President of the United States who looked at me and told me, when we're deciding who to let into the US, he didn't want us to accept people who had, quote, missing toes or funny foreheads. He said, this is how the President talks about human beings. Trump's absurd talk about his good German genes doesn't sound so funny when you consider his policies. Somewhere along the line, all these words of his and all of the actions of his administration came together in a pattern in which his belief in eugenics fits right in with a program that looks an awful lot like the F word, fascism. I mean, just a reminder of what we put up with for 4 years and probably going to have to put up with for another 4 years. I mean, he never read the president's daily briefing. Can you believe that? Like, the most powerful man in the world just didn't bother reading it. His attitude was, and I quote, he's saying, if there's something important in it, they'll tell me about it. The rumor is that it was rewritten very early on in his presidency to a one-pager because he couldn't read the multiple pages. And they suggested that not only should it be a one-pager, they had to put his name every other sentence to keep him interested. I mean, anybody that talks about themselves in the third person, he says things like, oh, well, he doesn't like Trump. It's like, it blows my mind. And the reason that we find ourselves talking about this guy time and time again is because we must not ever forget or turn our back on history. We must keep talking about him. We must keep educating ourselves and reminding ourselves because, Americans have a very short memory when it comes to this type of history. The stuff that was, well, Carla's saying everyone has a short memory. I don't have a short memory on this subject, and I think that there are, and the example I give of that is that there are, the majority now of Republican congressmen and senators are denying that January 6th even happened. They're talking about it like it was nothing, purposely. So they don't just have a short memory, they are purposely rewriting history. And this is what happens. You tend to look back on the slightly embarrassing elements of your history, and you either reposition them in your mind or you eradicate them altogether. And this is why I often think, does he even know that he's a fascist dictator? Like, does he even know that? Because all the scholars that study it say he ticks all of the boxes. But does he know? He's just doing what he does. He's just doing what he's always done. He has no concept, in my view, of the fact that all of these component parts of his views, the eugenics and the xenophobia and the race baiting and the white supremacy, and then the totalitarian rules, like gassing his own people or disappearing people on the streets of Portland. All of these component parts, you put them all together, separating children from their parents at the Mexican border, sterilizing immigrants. I mean, all of these things. You put them all together. And these are the parts that make up the fascist dictator. But in isolation, you're like, oh, well, it was just a little thing. This is why we must not forget. This is why we have to keep reminding ourselves of, unmarked vehicles with unmarked secret police coming in and kidnapping people off of the streets. They were his people. I mean, you could understand it if it was happening in Saudi Arabia or, in a far-off country where the government had been overthrown or was undermined, or there was a political uprising, or there was a clear and present coup. This was happening during his presidency, and he continued to president the day after and weeks and months and years after. Like, his presidency didn't stop after people were disappeared from the streets. That's what I just don't understand, like these things were allowed to happen. I mean, do you remember the photo op outside the church? Where they basically tear-gassed demonstrators to allow Trump to walk through to go and hold this Bible and stand outside this church, which he had evacuated, as a photo opportunity. There was a peaceful protest going on outside the gates. This was in this was almost directly opposite the White House. They had a helicopter come and buzz these people really low. That they were gassing American people to make way for the president to walk through. And there's video. It's all on video. I mean, I wouldn't mind. It's not even like it's like someone's memory. It's all on video. And you watch that day and you see how that happened and how that played out, and you're just like, he wanted that. Like, he asked for that. He wanted to be seen as this strong man who, there's a reason why he took that route. He wanted to go on that long, 10-minute walk from the White House to this church because there was a demonstration going on, and he wanted to be seen to be parting the ways with tear gas and rubber bullets so that he could show a sign of strength and stand at the church. I mean, there's a very famous interview with Trump where he's on Christian TV or something, and there are the two preachers, and they're interviewing him, and they said, what's your most favorite scripture from the Bible? What's your favorite? Because you're a Christian man. Yes, I am a Christian. All this stuff, right? Which is of course completely untrue, and he can't quote from the Bible, of course, because he's never read it. And it's the most wonderful kind of butt-clenching moment to see him wriggle out of the answer. And do you know what he says? Do you know how he manages to get out of not having to quote a single solitary line from the Bible, which we can all do, even those of us that are not particularly religious? He says, it's very personal. He says the whole Bible is very personal to him, and he really doesn't want to share. And I was like, wow. I mean, you really are a piece of work. You really are a piece of work. So, I'm sorry to talk about him. I know people are trying to forget about him, but trust me, now that he's being investigated by Manhattan, Southern District of New York, January 6th Commission, potentially the Justice Department, he's definitely going to run for president. Because that's the only way he escapes prison. So, and I guarantee that he's gonna win if he runs, because the Democrats their ability to organize is really very much at the moment on its knees. Especially if Biden runs again and Kamala Harris is his sidekick. I cannot see. I just cannot. I mean, where was she yesterday when he made a 2-hour speech? Where was she? Stand next to the guy. Answer the questions. Be share the platform. Accept that Grandpa is not particularly good at public speaking, so, be the one to take the questions. Be a united force. The decisions that the White House is taking at the moment are just awful. And he spent a lot of time admitting that he could have been doing more. He said, I should have been out. I should have been amongst the community. I should have been showing, and I disagree with that as well. It's about television. It's all about television. Get on television. Get on the media. Do a podcast. Anything that communicates what you are doing every day. And he's an institutionalist. He's a senator. He's a public defender. He's a guy that is steeped in tradition. And it's very hard to break out of that. He doesn't know. He needs guidance. And the problem with Kamala Harris is she's never worked at the White House before. So can she advise him? Will he even listen? Issues around housing. This is back to the Idaho Statesman. Shelter reaches crisis level. Protesters turn to legislature. Issues around housing have been boiling in... Do we say Boise? Is that what we agreed yesterday? Boise? Marlene. For some time, as rent and home prices skyrocket over the past several days, issues seem to suddenly become more visible. One homeless shelter reached its maximum capacity for the first time and was left scrambling as it tried to deal with the extra people who still needed a bed. A different group set up tents across the Capitol building to draw attention to the plight of those struggling with homelessness, only to have Idaho State police officers seize some possessions on Tuesday evening. Interfaith Sanctuary Homeless Shelter, which has been fighting to secure a larger space, reached crisis level over the weekend when it ran out of shelter space for the first time. Suddenly, on Friday night, we literally had to turn away 20 guests that we couldn't find shelter for in our shelter building, Interfaith Executive Director Jody Peterson-Steiger said on Tuesday in an interview. So that's what's happening in Idaho. Hello to Sean. Hello to Bunny. Thank you for joining us. Sean's in California. Bunny's listening. And if you want to message me, Bunny, then you just go to backchannel.tv on your browser. Okay, next up. The Chicago Tribune. We're going a bit more mainstream now. Omicron appears to have peaked, they say. Yes, fraudulent pop-up COVID testing centers are rampant. What? Fraudulent testing centers? I mean, what's happening here? It says Trisha Parida recently walked inside a COVID-19 testing center on the city's northwest side and was immediately appalled by the facility's lack of basic health and safety protocols. Employees collecting specimens weren't changing gloves or washing hands in between patients, she recalled. The site didn't seem to be enforcing social distancing, and the employees performing tests weren't wearing proper personal protection equipment. I would say that if you didn't have COVID when you walked in, there was a very good chance you would have it when you walked out with those kinds of practices. She's an ICU nurse who left that center and found another location to get tested for the virus. Some of those places are super spreader sites on their own. I mean, how is this even happening? How is it even happening? Officials still urge caution as hospitals remain stressed. It says Illinois appears to be past the peak of its largest COVID-19 surge so far, as cases and hospitalizations driven by the Omicron variant are starting to decline, but officials urged continued caution as the state's healthcare system remains under unprecedented strain. Governor J.B. Pritzker on Wednesday called the latest trend a welcome change after precipitous increases over the 7 prior weeks. I want to be clear, I am cautiously optimistic about this decline, he said during a news conference, but there is an awful lot of people still battling for their lives in hospitals across Illinois. Marijuana edibles spurring incidents. It also says here on the front of the Chicago Tribune, marijuana edibles are becoming increasingly popular, but doctors warn the substance are prone to accidental consumption or may pack too much wallop for new users. Yes, newly released numbers show marijuana overdose-related calls in Illinois jumped significantly after legalization, mainly due to edibles, but remained far below the numbers of calls for other lethal drugs, including alcohol. The number of calls to the Illinois Poison Center for cannabis rose from 487 in 2019 to 743 in 2020. The year recreational weed was legalized in the state and increased again to 855 in 2021. So it basically doubled. In 2 years. They say many of the calls were for the consumption of edibles. Looking for the reason for exposure, almost all were unintentional, said Dr. Michael Wall, medical director for the Poison Center. People didn't mean to eat them or didn't know what they were eating. Well, this is the problem with edibles. They do look like gummies. Just gummy bears. Just like regular chewy vitamin, multivitamin gummies that you might give children. Some calls involve visitors, such as grandparents or babysitters, to a home where they came across edibles. About 2/3 of the calls came from healthcare facilities looking for advice on how to treat marijuana intoxication. Most cases were not severe, but were resolved over the phone, but some required hospitalization until the effects wore off. I mean, this is... Because I've taken edibles. They're perfectly legal in this state, and you do have a psychedelic reaction. If you take 10 milligrams, as I mistakenly did the first time, I tripped. And they look like kiddie sweets. So I keep mine in a secure thing, up high in a cupboard, very high away from children and grandparents, although saying that my children's grandparents also like to take edibles when they're here. So, sometimes the grandparents like to have a little go as well. Why not? Why not? Symptoms of severe THC poisoning can include respiratory distress, loss of coordination, lethargy, and loss of consciousness in some cases. Yeah, the thing is, they're not even marked, they need to be, I personally think that edibles should be individually sealed, right? So instead of you buying a little bag full of them, where a kid could just keep eating them, they should be individually sealed. Probably in those bags where you need scissors to open them, not like the ones where you just tear them with your fingers. That's my take on it anyway. Should we do the US news update? Because it's just after 10, and we'll find out what's happening, across the United States. It's the daily podcast that I do. It's just 2 minutes long. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll play it here just to, A, give me a chance to have a sip of water, but B, so that you can see and hear what's happening across the country. Here it is. There it is, the US News Update that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday morning. It's the 20th of January, 2022. A reminder that Backchannel has a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs and their one-star cinema review, or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. And also the charming and funny Hal Rudnick. He is your pal Hal, and he follows this show at an hour's time here on Backchannel. So let's get back to now and see where we are at. We're looking at the morning newspapers. We're going to go into some of these subjects in a little more detail in just a moment. Thank you for your messages. Hal's mum is listening. Thank you very much, Deborah. She's in the house, she says. Debbie's with us. Sean says hi, Bunny, and Talk. And Stacy and Harper, thank you for being part of the show today. And you can message at any time. Just wake up your device, say, and then your message. Or you can go to backchannel.tv or do what Deborah's doing and talk to us on YouTube using the comments section. Talk says, hi, Anthony. Hi, Talk. Great. This is so good. I mean, this whole, it's just proof that it really and actually works. Okay, the Herald Bulletin this morning leads with all 92 counties in red advisory level for COVID-19. Yes, Madison County has been red since the 29th of December. This is Indiana, another red state, declared to be a red advisory level for COVID-19. Because yet again, people are not wearing their masks, people are not getting vaccinated. I mean, it's very obvious, isn't it? It's not even, you don't even have to be a scientist to work out why. Advisory levels are determined by an average of weekly cases per 100,000 residents and 7-day test positivity rate. From Jan 7 through Jan 18, there were 16,000 new reported cases of COVID in the state of Indiana. That's Mike Pence's state, isn't it? The whitest man in America. In Madison County, which has been in a red level since December 29, the positivity rate is 29%. Stephanie Mellinger, administration of the Madison County Health Department, said the rate is likely to increase over the next few days. Well, that's good, isn't it? Heading in the right direction. According to the IDOH, Indiana has not received a shipment of rapid tests since December 27. The COVID-19 rapid testing kits that the county health department does have will only be used for individuals under 18 and symptomatic individuals over 50 per state guidelines. Mellinger noted that rapid tests have a reduced sensitivity to Omicron, making PCR tests the most effective at detecting the new variant. Here we are. Okay, committee hears bill on gun licensing. It says Senate lawmakers seem to signal on Wednesday their support for a bill to eliminate gun licensing laws in Indiana. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing ended just before 6 p.m., heard testimony and didn't amend or vote on the bill, which is also referred to as constitutional carry. Whether it becomes law or not, good people will continue to be good people. They'll just have to pay a little more for it. Bad people will continue to do what they do, and they'll do it for free, said the Wadesville Republican Senator Jim Tones. Well, he's a smart cookie, isn't he? Amazing. Also, the headline is Indiana General Assembly proposed legislation out in opposition. Educators, civil rights leaders call Indiana Parent Transparency Bill racist. What is this? A parent transparency? Okay, here we go. This sounds like a kind of birther issue. Civil rights groups and educators rallied at the State House on Wednesday to kill House Bill 1134, a controversial parent transparency bill that opponents say will limit how teachers approach race in the classroom. Ivan Hicks, a vice president with the Indianapolis NAACP, called the legislation a dangerous and racist bill that promoted lies about America's history. This is what I was saying a minute ago. Erase the bad stuff. It seeks to pretend that the atrocities of the past have not taken place, Hicks said. We need to ensure that our children are in an environment where they can have an opportunity to understand the atrocities of the past and the horrors of slavery, not simply the greatness of America. Under the bill, students could file a complaint if a lesson made them uncomfortable and require teachers to post all of their curriculum materials online for parental review. It says, with teachers burned out from the stresses of teaching for a third year in the pandemic, education advocates said this added another burden and pressured teachers not to cover America's history of racism because students might not like it. I tell you something, it's not just going to be the students, it's going to be their parents. That's who it's going to be. Once the parents get a whiff of this, they're going to be down the principal's office. What are you trying to poison my child's mind with, they'll say. The truth? How dare you? You can't teach about slavery without talking about racism. You can't teach about Jim Crow without talking about racism, Marshall and Worley said. To put my child in a classroom where he must sit and be taught just the facts and exclude racism is a fact of life that black people face, that people of color face in this state every day, and it's unconscionable. Worley, representing several black Indianapolis organizations, said that none of the groups had been consulted before the bill's publication, which he said impacted the education of black children in the classroom. Their amendments proposed to the bill's author a week ago didn't receive a hearing, he said. So we're here now, talking a little bit louder, because we weren't heard when we tried to engage in a different way. Russ Skiba, professor of psychology with Indiana University School of Education, said a cultural responsiveness was a state-mandated part of teacher training and prepared students to educate others who might not look like them. I mean, it's just wow, isn't it? It's just wow. John has just joined us. Hello, John. Welcome to the show. Stacy says, what's up in the San Antonio Express? To me, the San Antonio Express just does sound like a train, doesn't it? Like you're going to catch the San Antonio Express. I'd say the train is on its way. I'd say the train is almost arriving at the station. That's what I'd say. What do I know? We'll find out for you, Stacy. We'll find out what's happening in Texas. Don't you worry. Okay, what's up next? Let's have a little look here. Where do we get to? Oh, yes. The Daily Advertiser from Lafayette, Louisiana. Take a tour of Louisiana's latest medical weed farm. In the opposite direction to the story on the other newspaper. Wow. Cannabis industry trade projects 2022 state sales to double. Yes, LSU Ag Center's medical marijuana partner Good Day Farm is ramping up production at its new mega facility to meet increasing demand for the product and stave off potential legislative efforts to expand the number of growers in Louisiana's program. We have the capital and the talent and the facility to make it happen. Wow, and a photograph of this gigantic medical marijuana facility in Ruston. Lafayette's bars see the best month since beginning of pandemic. Bars and nightclubs had their best month in November. Data from the Lafayette Economic Development Authority shows bars and nightclubs in the city of Lafayette made around $3.5 million in November, the most for a single month going back to December 2019. When the state began implementing COVID-19-based restrictions in March 2020, some of the strictest on alcohol-serving establishments. Governor John Bel Edwards' limitations on bars faced numerous legal challenges, though they were ultimately upheld by judges in Lafayette, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge. Yeah, well, the problem is, if they did really well in November, now, because of course it takes 2 months for these, the effects of these things to come through. This is why there's this huge spike in coronavirus now. Because in November and December, everybody just was like, okay, I'm going to enjoy the holidays. That's basically what they did. And so now it takes a month to 2 months to be able to, to see the shift in the stats. The San Antonio Express News this morning leads with Dems mount final voting reform push. Yes, the new Texas voting law was front and center on Wednesday as Senate Democrats made what amounts to their final push to pass sweeping federal election reforms. A months-long campaign by Joe Biden and Democrats to pass new voting rights laws aimed at states like Texas seemed all but certain to run aground in a failed bid to change the Senate's rules or get the bills past GOP resistance. Yeah, you know why, don't you? Because there was no strategy. There's no strategy. At least two moderate Democrats, which opposed the rules change, which U.S. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia argued would be a perilous course, effectively closing the door on the elections reform, passing an evenly split Senate where Republicans have repeatedly blocked them. I mean, is Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, are they the most hated people in America right now? I mean, they could be, and they must know it. And I hope it's worth it to them, however much money they're making, whoever's bribing them. I hope it's worth it to them, because they haven't once considered the views and the opinions of the majority. The majority of people, when surveyed independently, they want voting rights reform. They want more people to vote. The more people that vote, the fairer the election will be. And Republicans don't want more people voting because they know that that will mean that they will get less votes. It's as simple as that. But this is a democratic country. This is a progressive, liberal country in the main. There are more progressive thinkers in America than there are not. And so they are just not represented by our elected political representatives. So what do you want? You want just old white men who are a bit racist and a bit anti-abortion to be kind of just deciding what all the laws are in the United States? Or do you actually want people who are supportive of your views, who represent the people, the majority rather than the minority? And the tragedy is that Joe Biden has not been able to build back better in the Senate. I still can't get over the fact that Mitt Romney never got a phone call. How is that possible? That Mitt Romney, who arguably, who voted to impeach Trump, who is an upstanding Republican, who is somebody who is a real, modern conservative. How was he not communicated with by the White House? How did nobody try and recruit him and encourage him to support voting rights? How did that not even happen? I just don't understand. Maybe with coronavirus, there's just too much. I've said before, this is a perfect storm, isn't it? To have a pandemic in an election year, politicize the pandemic, politicize coronavirus, because Trump said it's the Democrats' new hoax. So it became politicized. But it also overtook most things. Coronavirus was something that the administration was working on all the time. And so maybe it just took up too much time. Maybe it sabotaged Joe Biden's administration because of the amount of additional effort that goes into managing the pandemic, instead of focusing on voting rights first and foremost, ahead of infrastructure, ahead of social care and climate. Maybe if there wasn't a pandemic, he might have found the time to phone Mitt Romney and say, dude, let's go get drinks. I need to talk to you about freedom and the right to vote for everybody of all shades, colors, faiths, cultures, creeds, nationalities. Well, it's only US nationals that can vote, that's right. Unless you're in New York, of course, and now there are some immigrants that are allowed to vote in local elections. Ban on late-night building back on the table on the front of the San Antonio Express News. The city is considering cracking down on nighttime disruptions near residents' homes and wants feedback on its Good Night construction site initiative. In a fast-growing city, hundreds of construction projects are underway as new housing starts have been on the rise, showing no signs of abating during the pandemic. Interesting. Also photographs of the Bastrop wildfire. A photo of a stump smoldering on Wednesday after the Rolling Pines wildfire scorched 783 acres in Bastrop, south of Austin. And finally, Pet Sleuth's dogged efforts reunite animal owners. 11 years ago, David Cauldron suffered the loss of a family member. Samson, his yellow Labrador, disappeared. Cauldron and his family searched their northwest side neighborhood for his dog. For the dog, his wife Yvette had chosen from a litter of 12 puppies. They posted flyers. The lively pup often slipped through the fence. This time, days ticked by without a clue. The family concluded their pet was gone. You can see where this is going. But they were hopeful because Samson was microchipped. Probably had one of those coronavirus vaccines. And then in late June, an animal care services officer found an abandoned pack of dogs in a Stone Oak neighborhood. They scanned the canines and one had a microchip. It was Samson. And then when an animal care team member called Cauldron and said they had his lost dog, he was stunned. He rushed to the shelter and saw an emaciated Samson, tried to hold back tears as he knelt and held out a hand to the dog. Minutes later, the graying Labrador slowly inched towards him. Wow, I mean, that really is quite something. Carla, did I ever tell you when I lost a friend's dog that they'd asked me to take for a walk? Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is a good one. They just got a dog from a rescue, and it was a big dog. It was an Australian Ridgeback. Do you know what those dogs look like? They're like scary, big scary dogs. And I was pushing my son in a stroller as well as walking the dog. But my friend whose dog it was had not bought a proper lead for the dog. It was just the lead that the shelter had given her, which is like an adjustable one. And as we're walking, the dog, who was very skittish, hears another dog bark, and unbeknownst to me, shakes its head out of this adjustable lead and pegs it. And the thing is, I couldn't run after it because I've got like a 1-year-old boy in a stroller. So who am I going to choose? My son or my friend's dog? Do you know what I did? I gave my child to a woman in the street. I gave my child to a woman in the street so I could run after the dog. And I ran for about 15 seconds before I was like, what am I doing? And I ran back and took my child from this stranger and said, you know something? I'll just take my son. And then I start walking with the stroller in the direction that the dog went towards a main road. And it was like 5 o'clock on a Friday night with rush hour traffic in Los Angeles. And, oh man, I mean, I'm just like reliving this now. It's terrifying. So the dog runs up this very steep hill, and for some reason I decided that day to wear cashmere. So I'm sweating. I push the stroller up, run with the stroller, because the dog has run up a street which is a dead end. It's like it's a cul-de-sac. And so I'm like, great, I'll be able to get the dog. But because the dog's not wearing a collar, I can't grab the dog. Because it's a short-haired dog, I can't grab the dog. And anyway, I'm scared of dogs, especially like Australian Ridgebacks that are skittish and have just come from a rescue shelter. I don't want to get eaten. So I get up to the cul-de-sac and the dog's like playing games with me, jumps over my arm and runs down the hill again and back towards the main road. And at that point I was just like, a woman comes out of her house, she's like, I saw your dog go that way. I went, it's not my dog. Anyway, to cut a long story short, because this is a long story. The dog is gone, and I phone my friend whose dog it is, and I'm like, the dog got out of the lead and it's on the run, and I have no idea where it is, and it's run towards the main road. And as I walk down towards the main road, I'm hearing like road traffic accidents, you know, I'm seeing like sights of like where this dog has obviously run across the road and people have crashed in. I mean, like chaos. And I was like, this is awful. And my friend's like crying on the phone, screaming, and oh man. Anyway, do you want to know how it ends? Because I mean, it's like there's a whole day goes by. You know, like the whole rest of the day. I basically take my boy back, get my car, I go driving looking for it. She phones me and goes, oh, someone's seen it down on Vine, which is like 2 miles away. So I drive down there, I can't see it, I'm looking everywhere, I'm driving around. So I decide in my infinite wisdom, get this, because I have a picture of this dog now, to post a picture on the Nextdoor community website saying, have you seen this dog? And as I go to post it, I'm sitting in the car, you know, on my phone. As I go to post it, I see a post by another person saying, has anyone lost a dog? This dog is in my backyard. And it's scared. So I phone this woman straight away and I'd be like, yeah, I lost this dog. It's my friend's dog, but I lost this dog. This woman is nearly 3.5 miles away. Say 3 miles away. This dog has run 3 miles across main roads and everything. So I phoned my friend. I said, this is where the dog is. I'm going now to get it. Come, bring a proper lead, bring some chicken or some snacks or something. And I go and I see the dog like scared, shivering, behind some cars in this like dead-end parking lot behind this woman's house. And I didn't try and approach the dog because the dog doesn't really know me, you know? Also, the dog doesn't know its name because it got given a new name and I don't know the dog's real name. So when my friend arrives, I text her and I say, arrive very gently. Like, don't drive up the driveway, just walk up, come very gently. And she comes very gently and she gets on her hands and knees, walks, you know, like shuffles over to the dog and like, you know, encourages the dog with some snacks and then manages to get a lead on the dog. But that was like 3 hours later as the sun's going down. I mean, it was so stressful. If I'd have told you like what had gone on in between, it was like just like trying everything. It was awful. And I'll be honest, I've never liked that dog. That breed should not be with people in small apartments. It should not, you know? And that breed should also be muzzled. That breed should not be not muzzled. Anyway, she got the dog back. And I said, why didn't you have a proper lead? Why didn't you have like a proper lead for the dog? She's like, oh, I haven't got around to getting one yet. This dog literally shook the lead off its head and she gave me this dog to look after. I was not happy. I mean, I was thrilled that I'd managed to reunite her with her dog, but I was not happy with this whole situation. Giving my child to a stranger to go chase after the dog. I mean, the whole thing is just like, none of it should have happened. Like, I should never have agreed to take the dog in the first place. I'm terrible with animals. I'm just not to be trusted. Not that it was my fault, but I'm just saying. Okay, so that's the San Antonio Express news. Okay, let's say hi to a few people. Hello to Sol, to Eileen, or Aileen maybe, Lyndon, John, Debbie, Buddy, Sean, Talk. Everybody's hanging out with us. So thank you for spending your time with us here, right here. So are we done with the newspapers? Kind of. We could talk about this story with Joe Manchin's longtime friend Nick Saban, who has signed a letter urging the West Virginia senator to support voting rights. This is right. Yesterday we talked about the national anthem and sports games. Now it's voting rights and an Alabama football coach And we're asking, should politics and sport ever mix? Is this a good thing? Do you know any sports people that have also been successful mixing politics or civil liberty issues? A lot of this, has been brought to the fore recently with Colin Kaepernick, taking the knee at the game. Okay, what else do we have here on this particular subject? Sorry? Oh yeah, here it is. No, I'm just trying to find the thing. Alabama football coach Nick Saban urges Manchin to pass voting rights bill, punts on filibuster change. And the reason I'm thinking about it is because this story is like a little bit out of date now, isn't it? Because it failed last night, He joined Jerry West, the NBA icon, three fellow sports personalities native to West Virginia, to pen a letter to Joe Manchin, urging him to help push voting rights legislation in the Senate without asking him to allow a rule change that would be necessary to ensure the bill's passage. Well, on Tuesday evening, Manchin pointed out on C-SPAN that the version of the letter made public this week was missing a key footnote in which Saban indicates his objection to eliminating the filibuster, while the other signatories take no position on it. This is part of the problem, isn't it? It's like, you can't make your case for voting rights and at the same time not make a case for eliminating the filibuster. Maybe their argument was, well, you won't need to eliminate the filibuster if people like Manchin and Sinema get on board. The letter was dated January 13, so that was like a week ago. Signed by Saban, a West Virginia native. Urges Congress to exercise its constitutional responsibility to enact laws that set standards for the conduct of federal elections and for decisions that determine election outcomes. It says, we strongly support urgently needed legislation that will protect both the rights of voters and the integrity of outcomes in all federal elections, the letter said. So Senate Democrats have sought to follow through on their promise to advance voting rights legislation. Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema, both key Democratic votes, have expressed support for two major bills, including the Freedom to Vote Act, but neither supports changing the Senate rules requiring 60 votes to pass most legislation, meaning both bills would fail in the face of united Republican opposition. Yeah, that's because no one got to Mitt Romney. That's why. Apparently, Saban asked for a footnote to be included in the letter, stating that the coach is not calling for the Senate to gut the filibuster. Manchin is just full of excuses, isn't he? Just full of excuses. I really don't like him. And then also, what else have we got to look at here? Oh, something from the Tallahassee Democrat. In the dark, Florida lawmakers creating new ways to keep public records private. The annual assault on Florida's popular open government laws continued this legislative session, even as the public clamors for greater transparency and access to their elected officials and government as the COVID-19 pandemic enters its third year. Yes, that's right. So we've got several things to talk about now. How long have we got? Okay, we can do this. This is because I've talked so much about Manchin already, and it's interesting to kind of keep that conversation going, but add a little bit more in here, if we can. Yes, the annual assault on Florida's popular open government laws continues this legislative session, even as the public clamors for greater transparency and access to their elected officials and government as the COVID-19 pandemic enters its third year. Lawmakers have filed more than 50 bills, either adding new exemptions to the state's public law records or sparking what are known as open government sunset reviews, which make previously public information secret. It says during the first week of session, which began January 11, and no less than 20 of those bills cleared their first few review committees, including a highly contentious proposal to shield the names of people applying to be state university presidents until finalists are selected. So, the headline is Florida lawmakers creating new ways to keep public records private. And this all kind of ties in, doesn't it, to like freedom and liberty and the things that we talk about all the time here, you know. And I guess, you know, here's the thing. It's like, you know, Joe Manchin's argument, I didn't watch much of the speech that he made that was broadcast on C-SPAN. I don't think anybody did really, but he certainly had he was using like a big poster. They do this in the Senate. They have these large format printers. They love printing out things and putting them on easels. And it's just very interesting to me that, you know, all of the points that he was making about the filibuster were effectively Republican arguments. There was nothing from the kind of Democrat camp that even presented itself in his argument. And I was really thinking about this, about how it's highly likely that he could just like switch teams. And they're saying there's a good chance that he could just switch teams. And you know, he talks about being a conservative. It's very interesting to me. Anyway, you have a view, you have a say, you have a right to say what you want to say as we have this conversation. So let's talk together if you want to. Let's just see how many people are having this or are involved in this conversation, because it's looking very busy right now. Alex has just joined us, Sol, Aylin, Lyndon. Thank you for spending your time with Backchannel this morning. If you want to have your say, just wake up your device, then say the word say, and then your message. Easily done. It's the 20th of January. It's 10:37. I'm Anthony Davis. This is Backchannel. And a reminder that we have a whole bunch of shows here for you to enjoy. Haley and Allison live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs and their one-star cinema review. Or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or what about Hal Rudnick, whose program Your Pal Hal directly follows this show at 11 o'clock Pacific. That's 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's what we have to look forward to. Are we going to jump to Florida? Because we're kind of running out of time, and I'm really keen to get this Ron DeSantis story in. And we also need to celebrate the author, the lecturer, and the chief philosopher of the women's rights and suffrage movements, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Isn't Cady Stanton a 70s singing icon? Oh, that's Candy Staten. Yes, there we go. You see, it's all in the pronunciation. Interesting. Let's have a little look here. Let's go back to the Ron DeSantis story, because it is very interesting. He's ignited intra-party fight over fate of minority congressional districts. Says until this week, the bitter partisan warfare and intra-party strife that traditionally engulfs Florida's redistricting battles had been noticeably subdued. And then Governor Ron DeSantis lit a match, apparently. Yes. Days after quietly submitting his own proposal for a congressional redistricting plan that gives Republicans in Congress an 8-seat advantage in Florida, his office released an explanation to the Miami Herald that indicated he has rejected the legal guidelines adopted by Senate and House Republicans and wants to advance maps with districts that raise doubts about whether they will preserve minority representation in Congress. So that's very interesting, isn't it? DeSantis ignites intra-party fight over fate of congressional districts is the headline in the Miami Herald. Yes, the plan adheres to federal and state requirements, especially district compactness, minimizing county splits where feasible, and protects minority voting populations, said DeSantis spokesperson Taryn Fensick in an email late on Tuesday. And additionally, it says the Northern Florida District is an unconstitutional gerrymander that unnaturally connects communities in Jacksonville with communities hours away in Tallahassee and Gadsden counties. Lovely. referring to Congressional District 5. Yes, the district the legislature created as a result of a 2014 court order which stretches from Jacksonville to Tallahassee across North Florida. And I think, the point of this story is that DeSantis is like wanting to flex his personal muscles now, isn't he? Because he probably knew that this redistricted map was not going to be accepted. But what he's doing is he's making a statement, right? He's making a statement. He's trying to seize the kind of authoritarian power that goes with being governor of such a big state. And experts say that this would reduce Black and Hispanic voting strength in congressional districts and raise new questions about his commitment to the fair district standards of the Florida Constitution. I've as you know, we discuss Ron DeSantis a lot, and we try and spend a lot of time looking at Florida and trying to work out, what of this is actually wanted by the community of Florida, the people of Florida, and how much of this is just DeSantis, taking all of the attention and power and wanting to, fundamentally. He always wants to kind of how would I describe it? He wants to change the demographic of his state. That's basically the way I see it. He wants to change the demographic of his state. And it's very obvious to me, and I'm sure it's obvious to people that are on the receiving end of these types of announcements, this type of legislation. But it's very sad that it's done in such open fashion. And we were discussing yesterday how DeSantis is likely to end up being a thorn in the side of Trump if Trump decides to run, because there's a good chance that DeSantis would like to run, for president. So you're going to end up with two people, both with like a similar rhetoric. It's going to become like a slagging match between the two of them to decide who is the peacock with the biggest feather display. And let me tell you something. Trump will win. And there was a survey that was done, I think it was done like a year ago. And it was done of people of Florida. And it was asking what percentage of people in Florida would want DeSantis to run for president. And it showed Trump as an option, DeSantis as an option, then a few other people. And Trump got like 59% of the vote, and DeSantis got like 12%. So even in Florida, people don't consider Ron DeSantis to be a suitable candidate to lead the Republican Party. And I don't particularly take him seriously in that department either, because I personally feel that he is he's like a very transient character on the national political stage. He's a big star in Florida, but I think on the national political stage, I just don't know that he's really got the. They said this about Chris Cuomo, or was it Andrew Cuomo? Andrew Cuomo in New York, didn't they? They said that he could be a potential candidate for a future president. And then, of course, scandal caught up with him, and before you know it, he was out of office and out of the picture completely. So maybe the same will happen with Ron DeSantis. Maybe he's like golden boy at the moment because he's putting forward all of this controversial legislation and rejecting mask mandates and vaccine mandates. But fundamentally, he might be a very transient character in American politics. Something might happen. You'll never hear from him again. You can't compete with Trump. You just can't. If Trump wants to run, he'll be the star. And he won't allow anybody else to get in his way. It's 10:44. This is Backchannel. No, the Arizona rally, if anything, gave Trump much more energy. It really energized him. Yeah, for sure. I really, really think we have to take the kind of threat of this totalitarianism very seriously. I really do. That's why I say you have to keep talking about it. And you have to keep reminding yourself of what happened during those 4 years. And you have to remind yourself, listen back to these rallies. And, if you ignore it, it's just not going to go away. I think he's increasingly popular. And I don't think that's just because Biden is struggling. I think it's because, fundamentally there is this fear from so many Americans of America becoming too progressive. And yet it's not on the world stage by world standards, in the European standards, certainly it's not progressive at all. We've got 10 minutes left, so why don't we have a little look at Elizabeth Cady. It's Cady Stanton, not Candy. That's why I was completely wrong. Author, lecturer, and chief philosopher of the women's rights and suffrage movements, Elizabeth Cady Stanton formulated the agenda for her women's rights that guided the struggle well into the 20th century. On this day, in 1869, Elizabeth Cady Stanton became the first woman to testify before U.S. Congress. So we're going to take a little look at her life. She was born in 1815. She died in 1902. And I do love that we kind of try and focus on these people that, history might have forgotten. Don't you agree? It says, author, lecturer, and chief philosopher of the women's rights and suffrage movements, Elizabeth Cady Stanton formulated the agenda for women's rights that guided the struggle well into the 20th century. It says, born on the November 12, 1815 in Johnstown, New York, Stanton was the daughter of Margaret Livingston and Daniel Cady, Johnstown's most prominent citizens. She received her formal education at the Johnstown Academy and at Emma Willard's Troy Female Seminary in New York. Her father was a noted lawyer and state assemblyman, and young Elizabeth gained an informal legal education by talking with him and listening on his conversations with colleagues and guests. A well-educated woman, Stanton married abolitionist lecturer Henry Stanton in 1840. She too became active in the anti-slavery movement and worked alongside leading abolitionists of the day, including Sarah and Angelina Grimke and William Lloyd Garrison, all guests at the Stanton home while they lived in Albany, New York, and later Boston. So she was quite well-to-do by the sounds of it, It says, while on honeymoon in London. Who goes to London for their honeymoon? To attend a world's anti-slavery convention. Oh, well, that's why. Stanton met abolitionist Lucretia Mott, who, like her, was also angry about the exclusion of women at the proceedings. So Mott and Stanton, now fast friends, vowed to call a women's rights convention when they returned home. 8 years later, wow, it takes a long time, doesn't it? 8 years later, in 1848, Stanton and Mott held the first women's rights convention at Seneca Falls in New York. Stanton authored the Declaration of Sentiments, which expanded on the Declaration of Independence by adding the word woman or women throughout. This pivotal document called for social and legal changes to elevate the women's place in society and listed 18 grievances, from the inability to control their wages and property or the difficulty in gaining custody in divorce to the lack of the right to vote. That same year, Stanton circulated petitions throughout New York to urge the New York Congress to pass the New York Married Women's Property Act. It says, although Stanton remained committed to efforts to gain property rights for married women and ending slavery, the women's suffrage movement increasingly became her top priority. Stanton met Susan B. Anthony in 1851, and the two quickly began collaboration on speeches, articles, and books. Their intellectual and organizational partnerships dominated the women's movement for over half a century. When Stanton was unable to travel to do due to the demands of raising her 7 children, is it any wonder it took so long? I mean, women are amazing, aren't they? Because, to not just to birth 7 children, but also to bring them up. I'm sure with not a huge amount of help from the husband, because in those days, the roles were very clearly defined. But also to commit your life to women's rights in this way, to find the time. I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating. And I can only, one can only really celebrate this this type of strength of character, I was going to say. Or your pal Hal is here. Are we going to join him? He's just shown up on the private chat. That would be nice to have a little chat with him. Yeah, let's welcome him in. Show up, Hal, if you're there. Oh, there you are. Feel comment. There you are.
Hello. Anthony
Good
Davis,
morning.
how are you, good sir?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. I heard you were talking about the suffragette movement.
Yes.
Yeah, and very apt right now because I'm sure partially what might have led you to that, voting rights under siege, and seemingly people don't care quite enough about it.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, this has been, we talk a lot on this show about democracy and the fall of democracy in the West, And in fact, we've pretty much made it the pillar of our conversations because it's that important. And I recognize that, is it me, Hal, or are a lot of people very late to this conversation?
Well, I feel like so many people don't realize the slow moving. It's moving mentally. So it's I think a lot of people are going to wake up and be like, what is happening? But yeah, from the 2016 election on, I feel like we were kind of through the looking glass, and it just gets worse and worse, weirder and weirder, and people are taking one guy's word over science, over facts, over, it's mind-boggling that there's not one shred of evidence about a stolen election, a fraudulent election, unless you want to look at what Trump himself was doing in calling the Georgia electors, etc. So, but as far as like the Dominion voting machines, and that's all nonsense. But people are snookered, so it's a combination of a fervent base and people being like, well, I guess that's just what's happening. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I'm beside myself, Anthony. I
guess
I'm
the
right
problem
there with you.
the problem we have now is that we need to change this from being something that just people discuss on the internet to being something that people actually action. And in fact, Hillary Clinton tweeted today a whole bunch of things that you can do to help bring about change. Because I think that people think that like posting on Twitter about it is like that's their activism done. And really her point is that you have to go further than that. You actually have to engage with the political system. You have to sign up to, you could even become a poll watcher. There's so many things you can do. I mean, I'm following a woman on Instagram at the moment who's taken it upon herself to rent a little van, and she's traveling around the country trying to sign up to work in these state legislatures and posting about it every day. And I think that, it's that kind of activism that one needs to see on the ground. People actually thinking that this is more important than infrastructure, certainly. There's no point in like getting infrastructure done if people don't have the right to vote. So
Yeah.
There's a lot resting on this, and we mustn't be. I don't get the vote because I don't get the opportunity to vote. So I'm not even I don't have a political position either. I just like to uphold democracy, and that's really what's at stake here.
I commend you for ringing the alarm bells on this because not enough people are, and also it doesn't help. It's a double whammy.